Most leaders know they need to build trust on a team, or at least that their team will perform better if they have trust between all the different members of the team. Especially when there's a reorganization or a new member of the team joins, I inevitably get questions about building trust. And this is where most leaders are well-intentioned, but kind of make the wrong moves. They do the team building activities, they give the personality tests, they set up the trust falls. I hope no one's actually still doing trust falls. All of these are well-intentioned, but they all miss the mark because they might grow trust a teeny bit in the beginning, but they betray a fundamental misunderstanding of how trust develops on a team. Trust isn't built, trust isn't earned, trust is reciprocated. And stick around because I'm going to explain exactly what that means. If you're new to the channel, my name is David Burkus and I study high-performing teams and work with leaders to build their best team ever. Work dynamics are constantly changing, and if this sounds like what you need to grow as a leader and to improve your team, then hit the subscribe button below, or better yet, join our email newsletter community, link in the video description below. All right, let's get into it. So trust is reciprocated. It's not given, it's not earned. What does that mean? Well, Paul Zak, a neuroscientist and researcher on trust, has been studying this for decades and has found something actually pretty surprising. When it comes to the emotional feeling of trust, trust is a chemical. Specifically, trust is the chemical oxytocin. When oxytocin hits your brain, you feel trusted, or you are likely to trust someone you're interacting with in that moment. Here's where it gets really crazy. When you feel like you're on the receiving end of someone else's trust, the oxytocin in your blood and in your brain spikes, and you're more likely to trust that person in response. When you feel trusted, you trust other people more. For the last 20 years, Zak's experiments have followed the same pattern. Participants meet someone, usually a total stranger, and something happens to where they feel trusted by that stranger, and consistently they are more likely to trust that stranger back. When you feel trusted, you're more likely to trust that person back. And when they feel trusted, now their trust in you grows. Over time, what happens is as you're willing to be vulnerable in front of someone, they're willing to be vulnerable in front of you. You grow trust that encourages people to take a leap of faith in the other person. And this is where most leaders get it wrong. Many leaders miss what happens after the leap. They don't act appropriately when someone decides to take a risk and test the trust that's being built. This is where the trust loop comes in. You build some initial trust on the team, and that encourages people to take a leap of faith. They share a new idea that they're excited about that's a little out of the box, or they talk about a failure, or they push back on what feels like is the team's consensus. They take that leap, and if they feel like they've been met with respect, that you hear them, that you consider them, then their trust in you and the team grows. But if you don't match their leap with respect, then the trust loop breaks. So how do we kickstart this loop? We trust first. We don't wait on the team to earn our trust, we freely give it. And there's a number of different ways you can demonstrate that. You don't have to do them all at once, but the more, the better. Signal vulnerability. The reality is you're not perfect. And when you pretend to be perfect, when you pretend to be invulnerable for the team, you're not really showing them you trust them. But when you're willing to admit mistakes or even just say, I don't know, what you're doing is you're showing them the flaws you have, the weaknesses you have, and you're demonstrating that you feel comfortable being your whole self around them. Now, when I say signal vulnerability here, I don't mean you need to go into deep levels of vulnerability. This isn't therapy, this is still a workplace. So you don't need to tell your team, oh, I feel like I was never loved as a child, or that you never had a date for junior prom, which is true, but is irrelevant. So we're moving forward in this video. You just need to tell them, I don't know, what do you think we should do? Or, this isn't really my strong suit. Anything you do that shows the team you're aware of your flaws and you're willing to tell them about them shows the team that you trust them and makes it likely that they'll feel trusted and trust back. Celebrate failures. Failure is inevitable. Even your highest performing people are going to make mistakes. Even your highest performing teams are going to have things outside of their control that lead a project or an individual to a failure. When that happens, celebrate it. Don't try and hide it, don't minimize it, don't point fingers and try and blame someone, and don't pretend like it never actually happened. Learn from it, and more importantly, celebrate the fact that you learned from it. We tried this, it didn't work out. We're better for it because now we know what to do next time. This doesn't mean you have to give out trophies or medals every time somebody fails, and it certainly doesn't mean you have to give amnesty to that consistent underperformer who might actually not be qualified for the role. But it does mean that when these small little inevitable failures happen, you as a team choose to look at those as feedback. And feedback is how we're gonna grow as a team. That's what we celebrate. Every failure is evidence that we're growing as a team. Share privileged intel. Nothing demonstrates trust on a team more than sharing information with them that they don't often have access to. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to be sharing top secret information, classified documents, or something somebody else trusted you with that they expect you not to share. But there are a lot of pieces of information you as a manager have access to that maybe your team doesn't, that helps them see the bigger picture. And when you clue them in on that, you send this message that you're trusting them to comprehend more, to learn more about how things really work. And if you really want to get everyone on your team's attention, pause for a minute and say, what I'm about to say stays here. And watch the way everyone is clued into it. It's like the ultimate way to show the team, hey, I trust you enough to share something that you might not have thought you needed to know. Maybe you didn't need to know, but I trust you enough to share it with you. Obvious caveat here, if someone said something to you in a room that says this stays here, you don't build trust by sharing it in a different room. So choose what intel you share wisely, but share a little more than you think you should. So now we come to the leap, that interpersonal risk that people are taking when they share something new or push back on an idea. Right? If you think about this leap comes in a variety of different formats. When you are sharing an idea you're excited about, but might be outside of the box, you're inviting judgment in on that idea. That's a risk. That's a leap of faith. When it feels like the whole team is headed towards consensus, but you see things differently and you want to point that out and bring in that disagreement, that conflict, that's a huge risk because you might get branded as just an overly negative person. When you talk about failures, even if it's a team that celebrated failures in the past, you're taking a leap. You're taking an interpersonal risk because you're risking being blamed as inadequate or underperforming. All of these are forms of interpersonal risk. They're all leaps that people make, and they only make them when they have a foundation of trust with which to leap from. This is where it gets tricky for a lot of leaders because you can't force people to take a leap. That's not a leap, that's just a push. But what you can do is create an environment where people feel like, hey, maybe it's finally time. You can minimize how much it looks like they're leaping or how high they're leaping from by calling for more candor or for crazier ideas. So in a meeting, for example, when it feels like everyone's headed towards consensus, you can say, time out. It sounds like we're all on the same page, but I feel like we haven't explored everything. Can anybody help me find what I'm missing? Or when everyone's coming up with the exact same idea over and over again, you can go, all right, let's get crazy for a minute. No idea is a bad idea. What else is on your mind? And what you're doing there is you're de-risking the leap. You're making people believe that, hey, this isn't as big a leap as I thought. Maybe now's the time to go ahead and do it. And when they do it, that's when you match their leap with respect. And there's a number of different ways we as leaders can do that. But the way to start is with modeling active listening for them and for the team. Why? Because the easiest way to feel disrespected is to feel unheard. You want to make sure people know you hear them and you're honoring their contribution. You want to make sure you're receiving everything they have to say. You want to make sure you're fully engaged, that your eye contact and body language show that you're truly listening and that you want to hear more. And before you offer your take, you want to ask them some follow-up questions. You want them to know that you want to know more. So before you offer any advice or anything else, start asking them some follow-up questions that get them to know you want to learn more. And by the way, if you want to learn more on active listening, we've got a great video of that linked right up there. Treat conflict as collaboration. The biggest leap somebody can take, especially with their boss, is disagreeing with them. In fact, one of the tests I often use when I'm working with leaders on judging the level of trust on the team is how often do your people disagree with you? And more importantly, how do you respond? Treating conflict as collaboration means responding in those times when people disagree with you with a willingness to explore their idea. You don't have to agree with them in the end, but you do have to give them a fair hearing for their alternative idea. What this means is when someone shares a disagreement, you don't push back on the idea, you certainly don't push back on the person. Instead, you start asking questions about the assumptions they might have and where those differ from you. Assuming your team is full of smart, talented people, the only reason they would see things differently is that they're starting from a different set of assumptions. And you want to know what those are, and as a team, you want to explore whose assumptions are most accurate. And whoever's are, that's the idea you want to go with. This is great because you either find a better idea in them or the team sticks with your idea, but that person still feels like they have permission to disagree in the future. In all conflicts, be open to the idea that you might be wrong, and that can often be a good thing. If for no other reason than we found the best idea and you got to model a little more vulnerability. Amplify unheard voices. Not everyone on your team is going to take a leap at the same time. And when there's particularly people on the team you know you're not hearing from, the worst thing you can do is try and get them to take a leap. Instead, pay attention to the small little micro leaps they might be taking. When they're making their voice heard in a small way, when they're sharing just a small contribution, make sure you use your power to call attention to that and say, I want to hear more. So often, whether it's because somebody is from a historically marginalized community or just doesn't feel safe enough in the team yet to share their true idea, so often people hold back or self-censor. And you as a leader need to amplify the contribution that you heard so they not only feel respected, they know they can take a bigger leap in that moment and certainly the next time it comes time to share. Now here's where it gets really fun. When you demonstrate respect for someone's leap, their trust in you grows, which means they're willing to take a bigger leap next time. And over time, the whole team learns how to respect each other's leaps more, and trust as a whole grows more. You build trust on a team to encourage people to take those leaps, you match those leaps with respect, and trust grows. That's true momentum. That's the trust loop, and that is how you reciprocate trust on a team.